Hello Glamour Ghouls and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Midge Munster and on this channel we do all things campy, kooky, glamorous, and spooky. Today we are doing the first of two Valentine's Day projects I have planned for this year. I have really come to love Valentine's Day and just kind of the aesthetic around it in the last couple of years. I guess it's probably around the time that I made the color pink my entire personality. But there's something I really love about the concept of Halloween and kind of making Valentine's Day spooky. Maybe it is because I'm such a pastel goth that the color palette of Valentine's Day and springtime really hits the nail on the head for me when it's mixed with spooky stuff. I saw this little comic probably 3 years ago or so that said something to the effect of, "You can't convince me that Valentine's Day and Halloween aren't girlfriends." And I think about that all the time because I do really feel like Valentine's Day is Halloweenish, and I don't know why I feel that way. Maybe because they're both candy holidays. But anyway, I love finding ways to spookify Valentine's Day. And one thing that always comes to mind when we're talking about kind of romance and spookiness combined is the Victorian era. I know, we just did a Victorian project. I didn't mean for there to be two Victorian projects back to back, but I've just been really inspired by that lately. But the idea of the Gothic romance novel was really prevalent at this time. There's also a lot of weird little kind of folklore things that come from this era where the Victorians were, whether they knew it or not, doing forms of divination to see the face of their true love or figure out who they were going to marry. In fact, we just talked about this on my podcast, Ghouls Night In. There's an old wives' tale from the Victorian era that women would hollow out an egg and fill the hole where the yolk was with salt and then eat that egg before bedtime, and then they would dream about the man they would marry bringing them a tall pail of water to quench their thirst from the salty egg. Which is really goofy, but really at its base form, this is a form of witchcraft or divination. And the Victorians were dabbling in all kinds of things like this. And that got me thinking about, again, a very old episode of my podcast, I believe episode 2 actually, where we talked about Ouija boards. And Ouija boards in the Victorian era were actually a very flirty thing. They were not spooky. People would use Ouija boards more or less as a dating game and would have a little sexy moment of their hands touching on the planchette. It was very exciting. In fact, there's a very famous Norman Rockwell illustration of a couple using a Ouija board and being very flirty. So spirit boards were not always this demonic thing. I still don't consider them that, but I know a lot of people do. So as I was thinking about Ouija boards' romantic history, I thought, wouldn't it be fun to make a Valentine's Day Ouija board based on kind of the style of the Victorian era to make it really romantic and pretty and of course pink. I started doing some research, kind of looking at Victorian design and typography and things that would fit into this era. And I ended up accidentally kind of happening upon this Victorian chocolate box. And I looked at it and I thought, hey, that kind of looks like the layout of a Ouija board. So today we are going to make a romantic Valentine's Day Ouija board based on the design of Victorian chocolate boxes. And because I cannot get through a project without adding some sort of mid-century kitsch, we are also going to make our own planchette, which if you think about a planchette, it's already a little bit heart-shaped. So we are going to try to make our planchette look like one of these glorious, beautiful, tacky, kitschy, ribbon-covered, heart-shaped chocolate boxes from the 50s and 60s. I'm really excited. I think this is going to be a super fun project, so let's get crafting. So now let's talk about supplies. I got this large wood plaque from Michael's Craft Store, and this is, I think, about an 11 by 15 surface area. I thought it looked like the perfect size for a Ouija board. I also completely lucked out at them having these, they were calling them heart-shaped plaques, but this is literally the perfect shape for our planchette already. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It is a little large in scale for our board, but I kind of want it to be a little bit dramatic, especially since we're going to turn it into our heart-shaped chocolate box. So they actually had something a little bit smaller, and I picked this one purposefully because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We are going to use a hole saw to drill a hole through this like a planchette, but we'll get to that in a little bit. I had my Ouija board design professionally printed and had it done with a laser printer. The way we're going to transfer this image will not work with inkjet printers, so you are going to want to have this printed with a laser printer. If you don't have one, you can have it printed at Staples or, any kind of place like that. The other big thing for the transfer is that you are going to want to print it backwards because we're going to place it face down like this to do the transfer. And if you have it facing the correct way when you lay it down to transfer, it's going to transfer backwards. So make sure you flip your image before you have it printed. The other couple things we need for the transfer are a can of polyacrylic. You can get this at Home Depot or Lowe's, pretty cheap. I think the whole can was like 15 bucks. You're going to want to get the clear matte version. Of course, you'll need a paintbrush to lay that down on the wood. And then you're going to want an old toothbrush or a new toothbrush, one you're not going to use for brushing your teeth ever. We're going to use this at the removal stage once we have our transfer down and it's dry. And then I just bought all kinds of fun ribbons and trimmings and things for our planchette. I went kind of crazy at Michael's and Joann and just kind of bought anything that looked fun. I bought all kinds of like lace and things because I just didn't know what would work best. So I figure having a lot of options to work from would be a good thing. And whatever I don't use, I'll use in future projects. So I think that is everything we need. So let's get started on our image transfer first, since we're going to need to let that dry for about an hour. So to transfer this image, we're just going to start by trimming any white edges off of the paper. Then we're going to use the polyacrylic. So when laying this down on the wood, you want to make sure to get a nice, thick, even layer without it being pooled or puddled anywhere. This is a little tricky to kind of figure out the right consistency and amount of polyacrylic for a transfer. I will tell you, I ended up laying the image down, I think twice, and realizing that it wasn't sticking to the wood. So this is a little bit of trial and error, but I will say that I ended up needing more than I thought I would to get it to stick. You can kind of see here the paper is a little bit crinkled from laying it down once. But then once I had enough on there, I took a flat edge. Here I'm just using an old gift card, but you could use anything with a straight edge here, and just push all of the bubbles out of the paper. You want to make sure it's completely flat to the wood, or you will have gaps or creases in your image on the transfer. That could be kind of cool if you were going for more of a distressed look, but for this, we want to make sure we can see everything clearly. Even here, towards the end, this edge was not sticking down, so I had to go back and layer on some more polyacrylic and smooth out this edge. Then once all the bubbles are out and everything looks completely flat, you're going to just leave this to dry for 1 hour or more. While I waited for that, I went ahead and got to work drilling the hole in the planchette. And by that, I mean I got Taylor to help me with the hole saw. So this is an 1 3/4 hole saw, and we just clamped this down and drilled it out. Then after about an hour and a half had passed, I went back and started removing the paper from the top of this transfer. So what you're going to do is take some water and a little bit at a time, get the paper damp enough that you can see the image through the paper. You don't want to soak it, but you do want to get it just wet enough that you can start to peel it away. I got really excited the minute I saw that the image was transferred really cleanly and that this was working. I will say I found that rather than using the toothbrush, the polyacrylic sticks down pretty hard, so I found it easiest to just take my thumbs and rub the paper away. This was a pretty tedious process. It took a long time and my fingers were fairly raw afterward, but it was totally worth it in the end. Just keep kind of taking little areas at a time with your toothbrush and your thumbs and scrubbing the paper away. Now, while I finish getting this cleaned up, let's get a quick word from the sponsor of today's video.
Hair Eyewear presents Be Midged, starring Midge Munster.
Oh, biscuits. We've got dinner with the Waltons in less than half an hour and I still haven't changed. There. That's better. Now I just need to accessorize.
Honey, I'm home.
Oh no. Darren's home. And I promised him I wouldn't use witchcraft in the house. What am I going to do? I only have a few minutes left. I know. I'll just use my pair.
Pair provides low-cost prescription eyewear with a twist. Their unique top-frame technology allows you to switch your style just like magic. And with over 650 unique magnetic top frames starting at $25, it's super affordable to change up your look. Virtual try-on lets you find your perfect pair right from your home, so just select your base frame and you're good to go. If you'd like to try pair for yourself, check out the link in my description box and use code MidgeMunster15 at checkout for 15% off.
All right, I'm all ready to go. Oh. Oh, I can't believe I almost forgot. Silly me. There. Perfect. They'll never suspect a thing.
Thank you so much to Pair Eyewear for sponsoring today's video.
Okay, so I am so thrilled with how this is coming out. I can't believe it worked. I mean, like, I knew that in theory it should work, but I wasn't really sure what to expect. I watched a video about getting this image the best it can be, and I will say that it's a lot of tedious cleanup. So right now I'm just going through and piece by piece doing another little layer of cleanup to get the paper fully removed from the image. Just doing a little spot at a time, adding water and like rubbing. Like you can see there's still paper scraps coming up. This is probably my third time going over this area. So this is a little bit tedious, but I mean, you can't argue with the results. The quality of the image on the wood is so beautiful. It's exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to look like it was printed right on the wood. So this looks so good. It did come up on this edge just slightly, but I think I can either touch that up with some paint that kind of matches, or honestly, depending kind of what I'm feeling the vibe of this is after I get it cleaned up, we may just leave it because it will look kind of antique. So I'm going to continue cleaning this up, and then we'll start working on the rest of the planchette here in just a moment. So I got in some comfy clothes and continued working on this, doing small layers at a time and drying it with the hairdryer to see where the paper was still remaining. Then once I was happy with the amount removed, I just took the polyacrylic again and sealed this image. The nice thing is if you have any remaining cloudiness from the paper, the top coat of the polyacrylic will cause that to fade out and you won't see it at all. So if you're still noticing some cloudy paper-like texture on your image, just go over it with a top coat and that should clear it up perfectly once you're done. Now it was time to get working on the planchette. So first I got out this paint that I had bought that I thought would match the Ouija board, but it did not. So I mixed up a color to match the border and was really happy with this color match. I thought it turned out really well. Then I started pleating this ribbon. I watched a couple of tutorials on box pleating, which is actually like a funeral practice for funeral ribbons and flowers, but typically it's done with a stapler, but I thought I could definitely do this with hot glue. So I box pleated this ribbon to go around the edge of the planchette. Then once I was finished, I took some lace and ran it through the center of this piece, just hot glued it down. This piece was for the outermost layer, so I just hot glued it around the exterior of the planchette. I did realize that I had not served myself super well in the way I did these box pleats, so I did end up changing them up just a little bit on my second round. I found that the way I did this didn't allow for a lot of flexibility when going around curves, so I will show you how I changed the way I did this here in just a moment. And yes, that is Karolina Zabrowska in the in the background. So when I started doing the inner layer with this pink ribbon, rather than doing a full strip of glue across the whole piece, I guess, the whole piece of ribbon when I was box pleating, I just glued the bottom, and this created almost like a band as if the ribbon were sewn and allowed some flexibility in the top and some curve to the piece, and that made it a lot easier when laying this down here in a minute. Allowed me to go around the curves of that heart shape just a little bit better so it didn't look quite so boxy. Before I laid down that inner pink ribbon, I realized I thought it would be really a nice touch to add this string of pearls around the edge where the lace meets that red ribbon. I thought it just looked a little unfinished, and I didn't quite know how to address it, but then I remembered I had bought these pearls as trim. This, I thought, really elevated it and just made it look extra nice. Then once the pearls were all set, I went into the inner layer and started doing these pink box ruffles. I think you can tell, especially with them kind of up next to each other, how much fuller and different the light pink looks from the red. It really has more of that three-dimensional effect that those old heart chocolate boxes had, so I thought this ended up looking really, really nice. Of different gold trims I had purchased to go around the inside here, some rickrack, and then this other kind of woven gold trim. I ended up deciding that the woven gold trim was the one I would go with. It just looked a little bit more cohesive with the rest of the piece. It was a little bit thinner. I just thought it looked more upscale. Even though I'm a huge fan of rickrack, and I feel like a lot of these boxes used to have rickrack as the trim, I thought overall this matched our Victorian style a little bit better and didn't take the piece too far away from the board itself. I had maybe just a couple inches left of that pearl trim when I finished doing the outside of the red ribbon, and I thought that would be really precious to kind of dress the planchette hole with these pearls. So I cut them into individual pieces. Unfortunately, the string that they were on was not very flexible, definitely not flexible enough to create a full circle. So I just cut these into individual pieces and wrapped them all the way around the circle. And after adding a few more small details, it is time for the reveal. it. I am so thrilled with the way this project came out. I had never done this type of transfer method on wood before, and I think it came out really neat. We obviously had some, issues with the transfer, but honestly, I wanted this to look like a handled Ouija board, and so I kind of love that it has a little bit of distress to it without looking too banged up. I was so obsessed with this design and I was so excited about the board that I really didn't think much about the planchette, and I am honestly so in love with how this came out. I am shocked. I sometimes I make something and I just have that moment of wow, I made that. This is one of those pieces where I keep looking at it and being like, wow, I would buy that. That's really cool. So I'm very, very proud of this, very happy with how that came out. My one kind of critique of myself, I guess, would be that I don't know if these two pieces look like they live in the same world, but I don't think they look bad together, and I think they're really both very beautiful. I was telling my friend I really want to display them now, but they're Valentine specific, so I guess I'll just look forward to getting them out every year. But I think we definitely proved that Valentine's Day can be beautiful and spooky at the same time. I really hope that you all enjoyed watching this video. I know I really enjoyed making it. I did want to mention I fell so in love with this board design. I'm really proud of it, and I think a lot of you are going to really like it as well. So I did make the decision to go ahead and put a printable, downloadable version on my Patreon of this design, both of the full board and then of miniature versions with little backs on them, so they're little printable Valentine's cards. So if you're already a member of my Patreon, those will be available over there. And if you're not a member of my Patreon, check it out in the description box below. We would love to have you. I want to say thank you again so much to Pair Eyewear for sponsoring this video. Remember, you can check them out at the link in my description box and use the code MidgeMunster15 for 15% off your pair order. And as always, if you are not already, be sure to subscribe to the channel before you leave today. We would love to have you as a part of our Glamour Ghoul gang. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and until next time, keep it campy, kooky, glamorous, and spooky. Bye!